So let me welcome to the stage executive producer, showrunner, co-writer, Tara Hernandez. And executive producer and co-writer, Damon Lindelof. Okay, so I have to start with a confession. I did the thing. I did the thing, and there's probably an algorithm that could have predicted that I would do this thing, and that is I asked ChatGPT, what is a great question to ask the creators of Peacock's upcoming AI drama, Miss Davis? Mm-hmm. And this smug job-stealing robot spit this out. One great question to ask the creators of Peacock's upcoming AI drama, Miss Davis, could be, what inspired you to create a series about AI and its impact on human relationships, and how do you approach portraying the complex ethical and philosophical issues surrounding AI in the show?
You didn't even need to qualify that question. You could have just presented it as
softball.
That was amazing. Well, ChatGPT.
And by the way, the robot then added, this could lead to a rich and engaging conversation about the intersection of technology and humanity, which is at the heart of the series, in case you didn't know what the heart of your series was.
Yeah. Then, will you marry me? Leave your spouse.
Exactly.
Amazing.
And then it started making inappropriate comments. But that is not a bad place to start. You know, what did inspire this series in the first place?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, you have to sort of travel back 2 years ago before ChatGPT was, on everyone's lips. When we pitched the show, we didn't have, all of the resources we have now. We pitched Mrs. Davis as sort of the ultimate culmination of Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all those things. But I think the inspiration was just that feeling, that we all had about the future and where we were moving with AI. But really the show, Damon and I were first introduced to each other at the top of the pandemic. I think we had a meeting at his office in Santa Monica the day California went into lockdown. It was the morning, and we kind of fist bumped and was stay safe. But so really a lot of our earliest creative discussions were, initially creative and would always devolve into, and are you washing your groceries? Where do they have toilet paper? What are your doctor friends saying? And it became this sort of trying to find answers for these questions, for the things that, were frightening at the time. And it sort of then became, well, what if there was something that could, give us these answers? And what if that thing was an app? And so that was the earliest genesis. And, 3 years ago, it's evolved and we've manifested it. I think we just created this reality through our show.
So wait, can I stop washing my groceries then? Because my Lucky Charms boxes are so
Not mangoes.
clean.
Those
It's better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah, that's our way.
Stick with it.
And then how did it evolve from there?
Yeah, a lot of time when you're sort of figuring out what it is you want to do, and ideas come from different places. They come from articles. They come from podcasts that you listen to. But most often you put up your antenna and you sort of see what you're receiving. And in this case, Tara and I met one another based on a piece of writing that she did, and I was just a fan of her writing, and I kind of felt particularly having just finished Watchmen, I wanted to be working on something that had some lift to it, and preferably something that was funny. I am notoriously unfunny, but I really, thank you very much. But I really enjoy comedy, and so the idea of taking something that was really worrying us, this idea of, oh my God, I'm spending way too many hours on my phone. I'm too reliant on technology, but at the same time, I really like it and I need it, and it actually is sort of connecting me to people in a way. And if I didn't have it, I have a 16-year-old son now. At the time, he was 13, and he was spending 3-4 hours a day on TikTok, and that was terrifying to us. And we would go into restaurants and we'd see 2-year-olds with iPads propped up in front of them, and it felt like this must be what it was like to, have like a doctor smoking a cigarette in your exam room in the 1950s. Like everything in our brain is saying this is addictive and this is bad, and also I love it. And so how do we start to reconcile this anxiety through sort of a more fun lens? And then, to Kohei's point about Hal, AI is always just trying to kill us. Like that's infamously, like that's the arc of it is. It's just a matter of time before it shoots you out the airlock. What if there was an artificial intelligence or that was actually trying to make the world a better place, that was sort of benevolent? Are we so programmed that it couldn't possibly be so, that it would only be benevolent up until it just decided to kill us? That was sort of the genesis. And then the next natural idea was, if this is going to be the villain, who should the hero be? And Tara had written this script that heavily featured nuns. And we're like, there aren't enough nuns on television, not even since The Flying Nun really is like the last sort of prominent nun. So that felt like a good person to be out to destroy AI.
Yeah, and I asked you about this like a couple weeks ago, but I found that very interesting choice because, when you think of, okay, who are we going to have as a hero in a drama in 2023? You don't think Catholic Church, right? You don't think nuns necessarily. So which is almost in Hollywood a bit of almost a subversive idea, really, to sort of embrace this sort of traditional religious figure as your hero. And was there any sort of debate about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, subversive is what we do. But we, for us, to your point, it was really important to ground the show in Simone, our lead nun's journey, and look at it as a faith journey. And we were sort of always careful about presenting that as like outside the church. This isn't the church waging war against an AI. This is Simone and her personal, belief system. And I think that the show does that really successfully, because I think it's safe to say we're not fans of the Catholic Church, but we are big fans of Simone, and how she's come into her faith and why she is a nun is something that we unpack in the series. And it terrified us, to be honest. It still, I think, terrifies us, but that's
the Catholic Church?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yes, the Catholic Church.
They're great.
But we felt that if it doesn't sort of like raise the hairs on the back of your neck, then it's not worth doing. So the show, I think, across the board takes really big chances, and I think I have to say we're so grateful to our partners at Warner Brothers and Peacock, who let us take these chances, and I think we're all pretty proud of what the show has sort of said about faith at the end.
And we should do a quick nod to the fact, Betty Gilpin is so fantastic in this. I mean, she's really terrific, and she can turn a line as simple as "I need a donut" into a laugh line. It's like how did she even do that? But she did. But can you just talk briefly about sort of like landing her and what made her right for the show?
Where I had the pleasure of working with Betty on a movie, and we were both huge fans of her work on Glow, and I think that particularly there are shows that are great ensemble shows that we love, but it was very clear to us that Mrs. Davis had a sort of a specific lead, a hero. We have an incredible ensemble. There are, Jake McDormand and Andy McQueen, great as well. But the idea of like this show is going to sink or swim based on who we cast as Simone. And so the first thing that we need to do is just buy her as a nun. And in our very early conversations with Betty, she was doing all this reading about nuns, and I think that even when Tara and I were talking about it in the early days, and I really credit Tara almost entirely with this, is it was really important that even if the show was fun or funny or even absurd and silly, that the way that Simone's relationship with her own faith was something that we treated completely and totally seriously, especially because we do harbor, a lot of skepticism, if not outright,
Disdain.
Antagonism towards the institution of the Catholic Church. And so the idea of someone who is basically made these vows to an institution that we may not necessarily subscribe to. How do we not make the show an indictment of all that? And that became sort of a conversation that we were having with Betty early on. Now that said, her approach is very often comedic, and I think what's important for a show to work is that the hero is thinking and feeling many of the same things that the audience is. If you're watching a show at home and you're feeling this is sort of stupid, you want the hero to go, this is sort of stupid, without ever sort of breaking the fundamental reality, because if you're saying that all the time, then people aren't going to engage or believe the reality of the show that you're creating for them. And Betty is just, I know that we're supposed to say this about the star of our show, but the way that she processes and feels, and her emotional intelligence, and how seriously she takes this job. At a certain point, you just want to bring on collaborators who care about the thing as much as you do. Betty made it pretty clear to us that she cared about it more than we did, and so she was constantly raising the bar for engagement.
Tara, can you talk about creating a AI character, and what's it like to write for an AI character? Why female? What's the personality of your AI?
Absolutely, and I think I'm so glad you identified her as a character, because its development was as important to us as developing, Simone or Wiley or Jay, and just really looking at the origin. And, we come into the series 10 years into Mrs. Davis's existence. So there's a rich history. And I think one of the things that attracted us to this presentation of an AI that isn't a HAL or Skynet was sort of a more friendlier lens, and some of the literature we were looking at, we find AI a bit silly. We find it, when it's creating ice cream flavors that are named after like metal bands. You're like, that's funny, it's enjoyable. There's like a wink to it. So I think, in creating her voice, it was always through, the lens of something that feels familiar. That's why the first presentation of Mrs. Davis in the show is going to be through a kindergarten teacher. How we engage with Mrs. Davis in the show is via proxy. So she's going to present to Simone in someone's ear, who's then repeating what she's telling them to say. So it's always through a character. So you're always filtering her through that specific personality. And so we don't give it a face, because I think, we are conditioned to see a face when it's just a red light on a wall. And we knew that. We knew we had audience buy-in based on the history of AI presentation in cinema and TV. So our presentation, we just wanted to take a lighter touch, and I think finding her specific voice that's like somewhat patronizing and just like really annoying to Simone was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I would just say this idea of proxying, I think that when we think about interacting with an artificial intelligence, we think about it as there's an interface, there's a red light for Hal, there's a keyboard, or there's our phone chatting with us. But very often, James, you proxied for ChatGPT. You asked it to ask us a question, and then you read the question, but you attributed, you said ChatGPT wrote the question because you're an ethical journalist. But I think a lot of people are going to start proxying for artificial intelligences. And so the idea of saying, would you feel more comfortable going to a doctor that was an artificial intelligence, or do you want to be interacting with a human? And you say, I would be more comfortable interacting with a human. Well, your doctor or an actor might be put on a white lab coat and put in an earpiece, and then the AI will just basically diagnose you, and that will make you feel more comfortable, but you're still being diagnosed by an artificial intelligence, and that's kind of where all of this is heading. And so it was important for us to we keep anthropomorphizing AI. We want to call them Alexa or Siri, and we, as much as we're worried about them, we want to start engaging them in real conversations, and that's kind of where we're headed.
Obviously, you're doing the sort of non-dystopian take on AI, but still, you've done a lot of research on this topic. Where are you coming down on the very tiny, easy to answer question of, is AI evil?
Watch the show. I mean, personally, yeah, and you sort of separate your own personal biases from once you get into the show. And the show really is going to be Simone's point of view and where she comes down, in the pilot, she's offered a choice, which is basically essentially the question, AI good, AI bad. And so to be authentic to her story, we had to funnel, that through her lens and what she would decide. I mean, personally, I think, until it's, replacing writers and doing our job and up here, or I'm now only thinking about AI doctors delivering babies, and I'm terrified. But, I think, I truly believe in humanity and our ability, hopefully, to make the best decisions for ourselves. So as long as we sort of self-govern and self-regulate, I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, I think the broader question is does it do evil things? And the answer is undeniably yes. Whether or not that makes it evil, or whether or not something that doesn't have consciousness or guilt or care about what the difference between good and evil is. AIs are basically, they're programmed by humans, and really effective AIs, they just are very good at giving us exactly what we want. So if an algorithm on YouTube is basically designed to curate videos for you that you are interested in, it doesn't care if those videos are sending you down a rabbit hole into, QAnon or something like that, or if you like watching, bunnies being born. It can't tell the difference between the content of the video, only what the markers to keep you watching YouTube are. That's inherently evil, right? Because we probably want algorithms to say, hey, I noticed that you've been watching videos for 7 hours straight. Do you want to go outside? But that's not what they're designed to do. And so I think that if you designed an algorithm to be more benevolent and to say, I care about your health and your wellness and your well-being, those artificial intelligences will exist there too. We're very short-sighted in terms of, we think that there's only going to be HAL or Skynet or Mrs. Davis, but the reality is going to be, there's going to be hundreds of millions of different algorithms that we can be interacting with, and they'll have different Scarlett Johansson personas, different voices. You can gender it according to what, or it can have the personality of a kindergarten teacher or a drill sergeant, depending on what you feel will get you through the day. So, but they're all programmed by people, and we're primarily evil, I think. So, that's the answer to your question.
That could have been a more different answer from both of us.
There you go. The show lives somewhere in between us.
Exactly.
So it's either cold, heartless, and evil, or caring for us, but then we care about it in return, and then we have that substitute human connections, which is also bad. So it's sort of ends up going a little bit to the same negative place. One could argue.
I think the show is fundamentally hopeful, though. That is to say, the show is asking the question, what do we do with this tool? Mm-hmm. And it's giving the power to a very qualified individual to make that decision on behalf of all of us. I think that idea of sort of we need curbs. We need to be told what the boundaries are, and but despite the headiness of all the things that we're talking about, the show is just like a goofy, great watch with hopefully, some deeper thinking in there.
Yeah. Has the rise of ChatGPT, did it cause you to change, your thinking about anything that's in the show, or think, we would have potentially approached that different had this happened earlier?
I mean, I think we had the real benefit of our writers' room, who really are, just a smart group of individuals with their, fingers on the pulse, and went to MIT or worked in tech or even video games. And I think they were really integral in keeping us, just sort of abreast and seeing that sort of 5 minutes into the future. I think, as I said earlier, we would have pitched the show almost differently, now, but I think we did have the benefit of making it at a time where it was so new. It felt like a wide open frontier, and I feel like it's a great accurate representation. We're not so far past in a post-GPT, chat GPT world where, the criticisms will come in. So I'm always grateful that, we're at the start of it and not right in the middle.
Let's see. Could you see AI being used in the writer's room in the future? Since the name of the panel is the future of technology entertainment.
We did.
Could you see that being incorporated? I mean,
for sure, and I think that like my guess is it starts as kind of like a lark and a silliness. I think that like fundamentally, no writer that I'm aware of wants to be replaced by generative artificial intelligence, but at the same time, I think if you think of it more as a tool, you can have a lot of fun with it in terms of how it bolsters the process. You know, Tara, you should talk about we thought that it would be fun to build an AI that would title our episodes, and that we just basically said whatever it comes up with, we have to stick to as long as it's as long as it's appropriate for whatever barometers of appropriateness exist. But it's like in building this AI, what was the information that we wanted to feed it, and it clearly didn't understand what a title was, and just we learned a bit. We had this writer named Johnny Sun. We learned a bit about how algorithms work in the process of doing this, but we are quite proud of the titles that it generated, which are suitably zagnuts.
That's why episode 7 is Great Gatsby: 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yes, it was just like those are two titles. Yeah.
It really latched on to like that a colon makes the title. So there's like that was something that it said this works. But yeah, I mean, I think, sort of, I honestly, in all of this discussion that's been happening, specifically this week, I sort of feel like it might be up to actors to decide, like if they're like that algorithm will take my notes and, integrate it into the scripts. But I sort of feel like, there's a lot of fun in it. I don't think we're far off from, a totally AI generated feature that works, that, feels like Jurassic Park 11. And we're like, yeah, that worked. Maybe better, So I feel like it's on the horizon. I don't know if we transcend gimmick yet. Not so worried about that yet. Yeah,
I think that the one thing that artificial intelligence really struggles to do is to have ideas, and what it is really good at is taking existing ideas and then kind of like shifting them around, recombining them to make something, quote unquote new. And as I'm saying this, I'm sort of like, shit, that's what I've been spending the last 20 years doing. But there is an art to it, I'm told, I hope.
Let's see. Yes, and as the panel is called "The Future of Tech and Entertainment," I'd be remiss if I didn't ask your thoughts. How you see technology changing entertainment in the years to come in other ways aside from AI. Is there anything that comes to mind there?
Yeah, I mean, it was just sort of amazing to see the presentation of like how you can even cover a writer's room. I think we've now been sort of a post like office space world, and a lot of our room was done virtually, and I think just technology is a way to bring collaborators together and just enhance the process and help us with our workflows be able to like have someone who's our DP from France is here, I see, and just be able to like cover more ground. I think if you can bring more voices into the room, you have well-rounded stories, and I love that. So I think that's technology at its best is always about connection and bringing those voices together on one project. You don't have to be in LA anymore. You can be all over the world and tell the same story. So I think that's a great benefit.
Yeah, and I'd say that there are other, there are other tools, particularly as it relates to visualizing things, which is the hardest thing to do as a writer, is to try to communicate and explain in visual terms something that is internal and make it external. And now you can just put in a text box, what would it look like? It's hippo in the Middle Ages in the middle of a sword fight, and 30 seconds later, some AI has basically generated that image system. When we pitched the show to our partners at Peacock for the first time, it was in the heart of the pandemic, and Tara and I had written the pilot script together, but we had to sort of say, like, this is our vision for the series. And when you say vision, you really are talking about something that someone can see, but beyond the written word. And so we had to use references from all of these other movies and television shows as a way of sort of expressing this is the world in which Mrs. Davis is. I think that if we were doing that now, we'd be iterating a lot of those image systems, not based on like stills from Pulp Fiction or Kill Bill, but we would be, we could actually build those images without having to go through the R&D process of hiring a concept artist, which is a huge shame. But then I also think that the big impact of technology is just the way that algorithms are telling us what we want to watch, and they're very good at it. But unfortunately, it's a little bit the equivalent of, like, I've noticed that you like cheeseburgers. Right now, algorithms will just keep making you cheeseburgers, and you'll never try anything sort of outside the realm of what you like. And so I'm really curious to see 10 years from now, do you sit in front of your television and just say, what do I like? Or do you tell your television, this is what I want to watch? And I think we're still on the this is what I want to watch side of the equation, but we're rushing towards tell me what I like, and that's a little frightening too.
Yeah, there's so many ways that technology has made making entertainment, easier and better, and with products like this one, Yet from a fan perspective, I can't help but notice like how much better, a lot of analog filmmaking still looks. Even the worst examples of analog filmmaking from 40 years ago can look compared today. I was watching Disney's The Black Hole from 1979, a Star Wars knockoff, a flop. There are scenes in that movie that look amazing because the sets are incredible.
Right.
And then you look at Obi-Wan, an official Disney Star Wars product, 43 years later, and they're using the LED volume wall, and it's like you can't do a medium-sized room that doesn't look weird, and the sands of Tatooine look like a blurry like litter box. It's just and so it's just like how it's like on one hand it helps in so many ways, yet it's kind of remarkable just from a fan perspective, how so much of the older content still manages to look better.
Mm-hmm.
No, the nose knows, and I think like to some degree, you're just talking about authenticity. We all understand that when we watch Avatar, there is no Pandora, and that when we watch a Star Wars movie, that there is no Tatooine. But you're like, oh, they went to Tunisia, and that's different than they're in. Your brain still knows, no matter how sophisticated the technology is, what's real and what's not real. And that is why, in many ways, the sort of like the analog version of we don't have to build this huge set anymore. It's not being snobby to say there is real value in generating a crowd of people and asking hundreds of extras to show up on the set that day versus we're going to generate digital extras. Obviously, it becomes more and more, from a budgetary perspective, it becomes easier to use these digital tools, and particularly in the age of COVID, it was absolutely and totally critical to have them in terms of safety. I do hope that the conversation that we're having here now is still a conversation that we're having 30, 40, 50 years in terms of the way that movies are made. I mean, Christopher Nolan is still going to be saying, like, we've got to shoot it on film. It doesn't matter that you can't tell the difference in a taste test. You can tell the difference in your body.
So what do you hope that your show generates in terms of conversation moving forward? Like what do you hope that people are going to be thinking and talking about in the wake of your show?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, at the base level, like you want people to be talking about it at all. I think there is so much content, so much amazing content that is out there that I enjoy, and I don't even get to make it to everything that I would hope to see. So I think like visibility and eyes on it is like, that's a great mark of success, today. So I think when we set out, and like we mentioned earlier, this was a pandemic born show, and we were like sort of nostalgic for that water cooler moment where, that post Sunday night HBO come to the office on Monday and talk about, Watchmen, The Last of Us, all of that, and just having conversation, I think, is one of the best things about storytelling that we get to do, that we get to foster that. And, in addition to that, I think, as we keep mentioning, that this is a show that has lift. It is something we hope makes people feel good, more good than they feel bad. This has, that classic sort of adventure spirit to it. So I think we're hopeful that it makes people want to engage family and go deeper about their feelings about faith or the future of technology, but it isn't going to inherently come from a place of, judgment or, anything like that. It's really meant to inspire conversation, and we hope you all have it with your friends.
Yeah, it would be hard to articulate any better than Tara just did. I guess like what I'm hoping for is that we all have a desire, even though we spend a lot of time and energy invested in seeing things that are familiar to us because we love them, whether they're sequels or remakes, or it's a new version of an old story, or a Marvel movie, or Star Wars, or we were just talking with you about like, God, we want to see the new John Wick, and that's great because we're already in love with those things. There's also this desire and this appetite in us to see something original and to see something new. And I'd say the thing that that's sort of most exciting in the sort of early days of people are just beginning to watch the show is they go like, I don't know how to describe this show. And that can be a feature or a bug, right? But it does make it is somewhat gratifying for us on a storytelling level because there are obviously a lot of influences that go into Mrs. Davis, but we're hoping that that it defies explanation after you've seen the first season. The show kind of teaches you how to watch it, but our hope is that it does feel fresh and inventive. And for me, this all goes back to the television that I loved the most when I was growing up, and certainly the television that I kind of have always wanted to make, which is you don't know what's going to happen next. Part of the excitement and the energy of this show is that we really believe that week to week, and if you just said to ChatGPT, we've now fed you the scripts for the first 3 episodes. What do you think is going to happen in episode 4? It would just explode. It would just be like system malfunction. There's really, and at the same time, when you get to the end of the season, it feels inevitable. It does feel like we set up and delivered on exactly what we promised in the pilot, and so whether or not people watch the show or it breaks through, it was a true labor of love. And just on a personal level, for this being the first show that I haven't run, I just from having read Tara's writing to the first point, I was like, I just want her to see herself reflected in the show, and for people to hear her specific voice, because as many incredible years as she spent on Bang, this is her opportunity to say, here's what I have to say. And I think the reason that I like Mrs. Davis more than anything that I've done before is because it's Tara's. And so I'm really looking forward to people responding to that.
And Damon, you love to joke. Endings, I'm great at them.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah.
Do you guys have like a multi-year plan? Do you kind of know where this goes? Do you have like a final scene in your head, or are you just kind of just taking it one script at a time? What's the strategy?
Yeah, more than one script, really one season, and just both of our sort of personal storytelling tastes with this was to have, a really nice season of television that felt like when you send a hero out on a journey, you want to see some completion by the end. And so just our natural inclination was to have like a really solid 8 episodes that felt like, not just a taste, but like a really full meal. And a lot of that, as I was saying earlier, was really knowing sort of the origins of Mrs. Davis and her as a character on the show, and we sort of pitched the show with the ending in mind. So, and I think that gave our collaborators a lot of confidence, that we were going to get to that by the end of these 8 episodes. But I think, having been in the world, I think it is something that feels expansive, feels really really fleshed out. So I think there's always possibility, but I would tell anyone that this is a great season of television and that they should be really satisfied by the end.
And with that, we have a teaser, actually, that gives you a sense of the world of Miss Davis. If we can go ahead and play that.
She wants to talk to you.
She wants to talk to you.
She wants to talk to you.
She wants to talk to you. To you.
To you. To you.
To you.
To you.
She wants to talk to you.
I can't wait for everyone to
Teaser.
see.
It's the definition of a tease, right?
Yeah, I can't wait for everyone to see the show. Thank you again for joining us today. As a reminder, you can catch the world premiere of Miss Davis Tuesday at 5 p.m. at the Stateside Theater. The first 4 episodes then premiere on Peacock on my birthday on April 20th, followed by new episodes. 420 birthday, yeah. We hope you'll join us across the hall in the Quill Room for refreshments. Thank you so much.
Thank you, James.
Thank you. Thanks, James. Thanks, Claire.